Good morning to everybody in TV land. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Boss Update. Today joining me to my right, Don Matthews. Welcome, Don.
Well, thank you. Good morning.
And we're going to talk a little bit about our upcoming event, the Harvest Fair, which is on September 16th from 10 to 4 at the Wakely Historic Site. And we're going to do a little update and recap of our program that we just did, Who Done It, which was on July 29th, a Saturday from 2 to 5. And we're going to talk a little bit to Don about how he got involved in Historic Point Boss. But maybe we should start with that, Don. How did you get involved? I know pretty much the story, but I think maybe from your own lips, and if you'd suggested for other people to do if they so choose.
Around probably 6 months after I retired, I was looking around for something to do. I'm a career carpenter, mostly in commercial construction, and but I've always had a love for furniture and history. So it worked out well that I wanted to go out and probably what first caught me was the history aspect of it. And I always had known about Point Boss, but I never went out there. I was just too busy while I was working. And I was really impressed the first time I went out there, just how much was out there. Mm-hmm. And that was even before the barn was done and the bunkhouse and the warehouse, which
I think Donna will attest to it from he said he didn't know how much was out there, folks. Most people that haven't visited are amazed at how many buildings and everything. I think there's now, counting our non-historic buildings, I think there's 20 buildings on the site. I mean, and it started with basically two with the old barn that wasn't historic at the time, but we always say it's kind of one of the best kept secrets around. So, but go ahead, Don, with your story.
Definitely, I would say that, and along with all the different activities out there, and now we've just added cooking, and we're planning on adding some more things. I think it's one of the probably more vibrant organizations that I've been involved with, and people are really dedicated to finding out what these different parts of the house and in my area, the sawyer, basically the carpenter aspect of it, and the lumber area. But history is always like a mystery. You have to kind of unravel it, and so that's just one interesting aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And it's an education. It really is an education on how people thought to solve problems they had with the tools and the capabilities they had.
I know that Don has especially enjoyed working in the carpenter shop in the middle bay of our 3-bay shed, working with a lot of the antique tools and how they did it, you know, with those tools. Because nowadays, of course, we got electric or battery powered, and we got tools for every conventional thing. But in those days, you know, they had jigs, but they might have had 30 of them to try to get the size or whatever they needed to accomplish and that sort of thing. And so I know you've really enjoyed working with a lot of the antique tools and the handwork.
Yes, it's a whole different aspect from my experiences in my career as a carpenter versus working with all hand tools. It's not that we didn't do hand tools. There was still many uses for hand tools, even in commercial construction, hand saws and planes in certain situations, because we did work with a lot of very expensive wood, and you didn't really want to make a mistake on it. And some of these techniques, there is no better way. So I did have a certain amount of knowledge of these tools, but it just grew exponentially. Mm-hmm. And just recently, and hopefully in the future we're going to make a video on this, I made with the help of Jim Nichols, I made a 3-legged bench, and we used the shaving horse and the draw knife to make the dowel that goes into the slab of wood that made the bench. And you had to use calipers, and you would take a little off, and then you'd use the calipers, and you'd take a little off, and then you'd fit it, and then you drilled the holes with a hand drill, which is another. I mean, all this stuff is a story in itself. All these tools, just using a hand drill, a great big, the drill itself, the steel part of the drill is this long, it's just massive. Yeah. And then you have a big T-handle on it, and you have to know how to sharpen it and how to. But again, like I say, every tool has a story in its own. But getting back to the bench, we just recently got a tool from Jim Allen, which has been just a fount of information and a source of old tools, because he's a fourth-generation carpenter.
I think the family.
His family came from the Adams Friendship area, and he's just a wealth of information about some of these old tools. We talk to people, and we just have no idea what a certain little part of the tool is for. And
take it to Jim. He knows.
Take it to Jim, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's what it is," and everything. And so he's a fount of information. Anyway, he gave us a chair leg. A dowel maker, where the chair leg goes into the seat, you have to make that dowel. But it's just not that. It also makes a ridge, because that ridge is actually what holds the chair up, not the pressure of the dowel in the hole. So, and that was just kind of like a journey of experimentation there, because I had to take this old tool, which was all rusted up, and I soaked it in cider vinegar to get everything loosened up, and that was like about a 2-week process. And then I got it all working, and then it goes in an old hand brace, but the problem is it didn't have anything to center it. So we were both, and Jim Nichols is basically we partner at the carpenter shop, and it's really great to have two minds working together. Yeah. So anyway, but I showed it to him, and it's like there was no place to hold the cutter.
Well, there's no way to center it.
There's nowhere to center it. Then again, we took it back to Jim Allen, and Jim Allen says, "Aha! I have a tool, and it looks like a big cone with a cutter in it." So what we did then is took the piece of wood that was going to make the leg, and when we made this, and we got this cone on there, and it basically just made almost like you would sharpen a pencil on the end of this, and then that centered this cutter, and we got this cutter to work, and you can do a job that would take probably 2 hours, and you can do it in 5 minutes, and that is
that's a learning experience.
It's a learning experience, but it also showed. I don't know if you could really do that job other than having some kind of a production piece of equipment. I don't think you'd have any kind of a tool these days that could do it any better. And so it's just amazing what you learn on those things.
Yeah. No, you also have a background with Wisconsin Rapids Community Theater, and you've been in a number of productions and enjoy it, and the Silver Foxes also. Was that about the same time you were getting into Historic Point Boss, or was that a little
I believe I got into the theater just a little bit before that, but it took about 2 years for me to really get involved in the theater, because I started with the Silver Foxes, and they weren't doing that much at the time, and it was probably meeting only like once a month, and there was like a couple shows, and it was basically, but that was enjoyable too, because you'd go to assisted living spots, or if the church would have a mother and daughter or son
dinner,
and father,
something like that,
dinner, and we'd do little skits, and it was easier. It kind of worked in conjunction with Point Boss, because at Point Boss, when I'm demonstrating tools and things at festivals, you have to be comfortable in front of people.
Yeah. Now, in your high school and grade school and that, did you ever do anything in plays in that?
No, I had a
From what we had talked about previously,
Yeah.
I didn't think you had done anything. I really never did anything either. It was kind of like stage fright. But but when you get up there in a persona, as Robert Wakely or whoever we are, you know, we can. You feel more comfortable in your own shoes because it isn't actually you there. It's
Yeah.
somebody else that's there. And so we can feel more comfortable. I never knew of that when I was back in high school or grade school. Otherwise, maybe I would have tried it. But I guess I was afraid to get up in front of everybody and try acting or whatever. So
Afraid is, probably more like petrified. I did have an experience when I was in 7th grade. I was at St. Lawrence, and a fairly progressive nun came in, and she wanted to do this play based on the history of theater, where the men played the boys played all the roles.
oh, they played women and men.
So I had the role of the queen.
Okay.
And it was just like, this was not my thing at all.
Maybe it was that cross-gender thing was part of it too. At
So
that time.
that was a kind of a bad experience. And
So it might have set you
it
back.
could have been a great experience, but I couldn't get into it at all.
Yeah.
So that was the only thing I had with theater. So I kind of stayed away from it. We did go to watch a lot of the theater shows.
You enjoyed that.
Yes, I did that.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's the key, even in theater, is I often shared with some of the other actors, and I'm very much just an amateur actor, but you still get the essence of things, and what I've noticed is I feel probably more comfortable on stage because it's my space. It's another character I'm
Yes.
playing. It's not me,
Mhm.
and it's just like at Wakely,
Yeah.
and it helps because we don't necessarily do everything in what's called in a trade as third person, where you are that person
Mhm.
and you can't reference anything from our time period. But we don't, especially myself, I have a hard time doing that because many times I like to talk to the people about how we found these tools, how we figured them out, and if I'm just working there like I'm back in that period and
Yeah.
I don't know anything, it's hard for me to do
I
that.
think the only way that really works out, Don, and for our listening audience, is if you have a guide with you that can answer those questions,
yes.
because you can't step out of your character to answer those questions. And so how do you say that, hey, we did all this, like your first bench, we did all that by hand and with calipers and all this until we found this second jig that would work and we could do it in 5 minutes, because I
Yes.
know you and Jim worked on that at the home show. And pretty much over those couple days you worked on that
Yes.
before that was finished. And now we do have a new and improved bench probably that'll be coming out. It'll be a 4-legged bench. We tried a 3-legged bench, but we find out if somebody sits on a little,
Yes.
off or something, realizes 3 legs, maybe it's not quite as stable as we'd prefer.
Yes.
And eventually we'd like to do, and Don would like to do, is some more of those natural benches throughout the site. We've got some now that are put together with lumber. They certainly look good and they work well, but they're not what we call historic. So we'd probably like to get something a little more historic looking
Yes.
for the people that come down to the site, the guests that come and then they under shade trees. Sometimes they want to rest a little bit. Then that's good. Would you, Don, recommend Historic Point Boss to other people that have a inkling of an interest, and of course it doesn't matter necessarily if you want to play a character such as Don does, or myself or anybody, but you may want to just help behind the scenes to work on projects and stuff. We have every Monday we have a working day. We work Monday, depending on what projects we go on, for about 3 or 4 hours, or maybe a whole day depending on what's going on. But we've got all different kind of roles to fill, and so it doesn't even necessarily that you have to be a character, though you may want to be. I mean, that's fine.
Definitely. Oh, I would really recommend Point Boss and the whole community out there. Probably what's so appealing about it there is no pressure.
Mhm.
There is no pressure to commit to anything. It's if you just like Mike says, if you just want to come out and hang out, we do. Our Monday work days do sometimes kind of dissolve in just basically talking about things, but that's part of the fun of it.
Well, and then you even talked in retrospect, yesterday, we're filming this on Tuesday, on Monday, Don did say that maybe we should just have a day where we sit down and talk about all these things we want to do and kind of put them in perspective and maybe prioritize them.
Yes.
Because we've got, as you know, with any like home that you have at home or anything like that, there's 1,001 things to do, and it's eternal maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So we sometimes have to sit down to sit and talk about what we want to do and what we should do first and down the road. But
and there's so many different trades you can get into. We have, if someone's into chainsawing, or if they're into wood carving, or if they're into cooking, or if they like to paint, or if they like crafts. We have just recently, I think we've gotten a lot more people that are interested in the artistic part of it, with looms and with sewing and other crafts. We just lost our pottery maker, but hopefully we're kind of looking for someone if they are interested in demonstrating making pottery.
yeah, we've got a wheel down there that's a hand pumped wheel, and certainly that's available to anybody. And like Don has mentioned, we're a big community, a big family. We certainly welcome you down, and I think what appeals to most people that have come and checked us out is there is no pressure. If you want to get involved, you can get involved. Diane Nickel is in charge of costuming, and so if somebody needs a costume, we can get you put something together. They probably got it already. Just we can outfit you if you want to just try to play a side role. Just kind of watch how somebody does something and see if you feel like you wanted to fit in there, or if you want to try something else.
Also, too, one of our newer, well, it's not a new project, but it's a revitalization of a project that was on site. It's a nature trail. And do you think the presence of the master gardeners helped gain more interest in nature trail?
I think so. I think that Paula Clavine, one of the master gardeners, is a neighbor of ours, lives in the subdivision just south of us, and she walks through every day when she comes over to look at the garden or do something. She walks through the trail, part of the trail system.
I remember that, yes.
And of course the trail system was quite extensive and has kind of fallen disrepair just because there wasn't somebody that showed interest in it like there originally was. And so we have a Eagle Scout project. A young man's going to do that project about revitalizing the trail and the markers and all that stuff that goes with it. And master gardeners want to work with him. I got a couple individuals that called me that when they're ready to do this, they're ready to volunteer. So I think that's kind of a nice project to get that back on, because we want Historic Point Boss to be not only historic site, but a kind of a nature site too, where you can come and walk the trails, or you can snowshoe, or you can cross-country ski. You can do all these things. You can come out for a day. We got a nice big parking lot. You can park and go off and just observe nature, or you can, if we're open on that particular day, you can come over and see an event, and that sort of thing. We want to be a community asset, I think, is what we're really trying to say, is for you in whatever aspect you want. And like Don was saying, the trails. Hey, if you don't have an interest extremely in history, but you'd like nature, and you can identify flowers and herbs and wildlife and things like that. This fall when we have school groups back again, we're going to give them an option when the trails are done to maybe a segment of what they can do is do trails. They can do trails, and we need that person to kind of be a guide around the trails that would be very observant and would know these things. If you got a sign there, I can tell you what it is, but I don't know it offhand, probably most things anyway. But we need that sort of a nature person that can lead those sort of trail walks and that sort of thing, which I think will be a great addition for a lot of these school kids. Like most of us grew up in the city and probably weren't overly familiar with nature, though we went in woods and everything, but we didn't know what these different plants were and what they were for. So it'll be kind of interesting, I think, to expand that.
Yes. I like nature trails quite a lot. There is a part of the green trail and point that kind of goes through forest, but other than that, in this area, I don't believe there's another nature trail that goes through this kind of a forest. There's some trees that are probably could get 4 or 5 lengths of pulp out of before they start even branching out. They're so huge up back there. It was really surprising the first time I walked back there. So it's just another opportunity. I don't believe there's anything that I can think of that a person couldn't do out there.
Right.
Really. And if you think it's acting, well, we have whodunit, and basically a lot of the presentation is really acting.
And that's a good segue. We can talk about whodunit, Don.
Yes.
July 29th, it just, as we're filming this about 2 weeks ago, it was on a Saturday from 2 to 5, beautiful day, about 80 degrees, low humidity, had a beautiful turnout, probably one of our best ever. Luke Conkle writes our whodunit scripts. And the beauty of it for Don and I, Don played Sheriff Ray Falk and I played Robert Wakely for the event. Different people play different characters, is we don't know the outcome. We don't know who did it. So that's the beauty of it, because when people come up to you, they want you to tell us who did it or something. Well, we don't know ourselves until the reveal is held, and that's held after the event is done, and then Luke goes through the whole sequence of how things happen. We don't know ourselves, but how was it from Ray Falk's perspective? Were you getting a lot of heat over there? We were kind of sending it from the house. Did you feel it? Don was in the bunkhouse, by the way.
It was a lot. It was different. It was a different. I've done probably 4 whodunits now, I think, and it was so much different. There was so many. It was more people. There was a lot of people that are asking questions. I personally like people that come early. There's a segment of people that like to come probably for the last half hour, and then they go around a little bit and then wait for the reveal. But I kind of like people that are there and they get into the. It's a game. It's like Clue, and you talk to people and I kind of like to be challenged, because you have to figure out where these people are going, because they're always trying to trick you. They're always trying to get you to stumble, get you to reveal something, and it's just like an interrogation. Basically, they interrogate us, right? Wouldn't you say that?
I would say the people that are really into it is the ones Don likes. I also enjoy those. They come early, they sit down on the picnic tables with their group of 4, 5, or 6, and they go through this together. Who should we ask what, and they kind of plan it all out.
Yes.
These people are into it, and so then they go around in a certain sequence, and then they'll come back sometimes 2 or 3 times because they catch Doc Amundsen saying something, then they want to check with the sheriff, was that true or not true, and sometimes we don't know if Doc Amundsen said that, or if they're just saying Doc said that just to trip you up and have you reveal something you're not supposed to reveal.
I never thought of that. I did start getting into being more honest. Like no, I never said that. I don't know about it, because it's like I'm not even going to get into this because I'm going to trip myself up so bad.
And how do you like, Don? Because you've had that ability to play a couple characters. You were Andrew Crystal, I think, for 1 or 2 years. Now you've been sheriff for a couple years. So how do you like the change in characters? Do you like that, or would you rather stay with one character? Because we got basically a monologue going on here for a number of years, and it's kind of in and out of the same characters. A few new ones come in, but it's basically there's a core group of about 10 that are always the same. I've only played one character, so that's why I'm asking you.
That's an excellent question. I did enjoy playing Andrew Crystal because it's in my realm of the shop.
Yeah.
But the sheriff is an interesting character. Again, it's something I'm not used to, and
the problem with the Sheriff Falk is he's played up as being basically not an honest sheriff. So that makes it a little harder. You don't usually think of the sheriff; he can't be involved because he's investigating. He's the good guy here, but anybody else could be game. But they set you up as being part of the game.
The sheriff is definitely a more interesting character because, I mean, you can't play it holier than thou. You have to have to where you you answer questions to where it looks like he's guilty, but averting things, and I kind of messed up because sometimes I would say, no, I didn't say that, and I think I'm learning how to answer questions more like a politician.
Yeah, don't give them an answer, just talk around it.
So then you can you don't come out and just say bluntly, I didn't do that.
Yeah, you got to learn ladies and gentlemen, that great talent of obfuscation. In other words, you never tell them exactly what they want to hear. You just tell them what you want them to know. But
so it's definitely a learning experience.
Yeah.
So I think it's more challenging, and it makes it fun. I mean, it's daunting at times. Sometimes, just like, what did I get into? But
and part of
it's rewarding.
Part of the background for you folks at home is that Luke writes this. He sketches it out in August, and then when I email him in June, he starts to fill it in.
Yes.
So we get the our part of it, and everybody else's bio. We get that approximately 10 or 12 days before, not any more than 12. It's usually about 10 days before. And we get the booklet information. Well, this time it was like the day before, but usually we get that about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But so we know about our character, and then we got to know about our interrelationships with other characters, because there's a playoff against one another. And of course, this year, two characters that normally wouldn't ever think of being guilty, this was called the Ice Mummy this year, were Doc Amundsen, who's been a standard on there for years, other than a year or two he was gone helping in the Civil War, and Newbold Wakely. Could you imagine? Robert's son involved in this murder, or at least covering it up.
Was 16-year-old?
Yeah, 16-year-old covering up this. And so that was kind of interesting, because usually us Wakeleys think we're over and above this because we can't hardly be written out of the script, though. It happens. Pierre Charette even got written out one time, but he was back in a year or so. He got pardoned or something. I don't know what happened to him.
There was a lot of questions about, would you really go as far as to arrest the Wakely and all that stuff like that. So then you got to figure out how do you approach that.
Well, and we had one couple there were from Charleston, South Carolina. So they
were interesting.
They have the Southern mentality with the plantation holder, and which the plantation holder owns everything, and everybody else works or rents from him. Well, and it's more or less the same, fairly similar in Point Boss, because Robert Wakely kind of owns most of what you see, and the blacksmith rents the blacksmith shop, and the sawyer rents the sawyer shop, and the ice man rents the ice shop, and so we're all kind of together. But Robert Wakely is kind of like he certainly wasn't wealthy, but he was a kind of a kingpin, a Point Boss anyway.
Oh, definitely.
So it makes it a little different. So we always think in the house that we're beyond guilt. We found out this year we weren't.
Yes, he asked the question whether I was basically just a shill for Robert Wakely.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there was a lot of.
But it was great, and a lot of people, like we said, there was a couple from Charleston, South Carolina. Now, folks, they didn't come here all the way to mid-Wisconsin just for this whodunit, but they were around the area, and they liked this sort of thing, and so they came. But there was a couple couples from Marshfield that came over, and there was people. In fact, normally at most of our events, I know probably 75% of the people, because they're regulars that come back, maybe 2 or 3 times a year and sort of thing. I only knew probably 10 or 15% of these people. I hadn't seen a lot of them. A lot of them were ladies, groups of women that were out together on a kind of an outing and an enjoyable day. It's the gals you'd see like at Master Gardener's Garden Walk. These groups come through, these ladies. I mean, that's the same sort of a crew we had there. And I liked it because, a lot of people say, well, why do you do a whodunit? What's that got to do with anything? But folks, it brings in people that never would come otherwise. And if they come, they say, oh, I didn't know you had all this here. And then they say, what's your next event? Well, we had them a little schedule. It tells them September 16th is Harvest Fair, and then we got, 21st and 28th is Spirit Walk, and December we got Heritage Holiday. So it brings them back for things, and that's the name of the game.
Yes.
If you did the same thing and all you did is have an event where all you did is interpret the buildings, unless you got something special, people are going to come once or twice and say, well, I've been there already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
you hear that.
I you know me, I kind of cheated a little bit on that. It's like this one lady asked me about the bunkhouse, and I started,
Describing
just like,
it?
like put a quarter and you get $5. and I started talking about the history of the Point Boss and the how the logs came down in the rafting and more people started coming and they were
The whole group around you.
and it's like, then how do you get out of this? Because
Yeah.
and people are asking more questions, and it turns
Yeah.
into a big history thing. And
Yeah.
but it's amazing. Even I'm not sure if they're familiar with the Spirit Walk. That's another very interesting thing we have, where we have like a ghost history.
Haunted history,
Yes.
we call it.
Yes, but many times I was the storyteller to kind of occupy people before they would go on their tour, and so at the end, at the last couple of years, I was giving people the options whether they wanted to hear history at Point Boss or a story, and probably half of them would want to learn more history. So then you'd start talking about the history of the place. There's so much people really don't realize that Point Boss had like 127 or 126 people. They had a post office for 4 years. They really thought that was going to be a very influential community in Wisconsin, and so it's just a wealth of history.
Yeah, and I think Don's right. Now, Spirit Walk, which we'll talk about in a month or so, is another event, but it's one of those events where 50% of the people you know and 50% are different people, so you don't know them. So it's another event that brings in people that don't normally come all the time. But so I think we covered whodunit pretty well. And now we'll go into our next event, which is September 16th. It's our Harvest Fair. It's from 10 to 4, adults $3 and students $2. We're open from 10 to 4, a good day to come down. It's a kind of a little more of a laid-back day, as Tom Bramer would say when he's with me on the program. It's a day you can come down and you can talk to somebody in the cabin or the house, or in this case, maybe the bunkhouse or something, and get a little more history of the things. We're not so busy. The festival that we have in June is kind of so busy you won't have time sometimes to talk and to kind of get laid back and like you did with some people talking about the history, and we all are kind of like wound up when we get let us go, then we're going to tell them everything. But it's a good day to do that. Now, of course, the Harvest Fair denotes that we're going to do some of the harvest things, like we're going to be, the Jim Giese and his family are going to be making, as they have done for probably the last 20 years, they're going to be making their sauerkraut. So they're going to be, shredding the cabbage and adding their salt, and he puts a little flour and a little sugar in there, and he's got his own mix. And they make probably 15 or 25 gallon pails. They also make one. I always go over there and do due diligence. I shred about 3 heads of cabbage. I put an appearance at a high style gym, and I shred those cabbages, and then we have 1 5-gallon pail for ourselves that we stave for our winter feast, which is in February. So that said, they do that. He goes over to Black Earth, where, on the way to Green Bay, where they got those cabbages about bigger than basketballs.
Oh, he said he got them from Almond last year, and they were like
huge,
yes,
and heavy. They're probably 15 pounds. These cabbages. And anyway, their family has done this traditionally. Al Giese was his father and helped us in a lot of aspects, the building of the site at the time in the early years. And so Jim, as a son, has retired now from the Solaris. In fact, when we dedicated the barn, I didn't have any Solaris representatives, so I knew Jim worked for Solaris. Says, come over and cut the twine over here at the barn for Solaris, because we got telephone poles from Solaris. But Jim does that in the ice house bay. We'll also be doing, we've got a cider press. We have to grind up the apples, and then we have to put them in a kind of a screw press, and we press and make apple cider, so you get to taste that. We also have a great crop of apples this year, so we're very excited. We picked 3 bushels yesterday from our early trees, our early fall trees. and then we'll pick the rest just before the Harvest Fair. That'll be used for our spirit walk. We
Yes.
serve hot apple cider, so it has a dual purpose. You get to taste some of this, get a sample of that sort of thing, and an extra bonus this year, which we normally have never had, and as that is, we will probably make a little ice cream. We had, because of a rain-shortened Sunday at our festival, we've got 5 mixes of ice cream to make up. So I think you'll probably, most of the day, we'll have a little ice cream on and off here and there, sort of thing, to try some of that ice cream that we saved and we froze from the festival, because we just couldn't use it all up, and it was a rain-shortened day, and so it's an added thing. Normally we don't have it available.
We may have some apple butter to put on it too.
Yeah. We're talking. Hope to talk to the gals, take some apples in the house and cook up some apple butter, and maybe that'll be a great smell in the house anyway. You can imagine that, the apples are brewing there with a little cinnamon in the air and stuff like that. I mean, that's got me salivating now, folks. I mean, I'm gonna have to get my bib out pretty soon, but. So we hope to have that. And in other words, there's activities going all over. Don, in his spare time, if he's not helping with the cider press, though I think Larry is kind of on the cider press this year, and probably Ted may help out making some ice cream, or he may be doing some benches in the carpenter shop, and the barn will be open. I think, I'm pretty sure we got some horses coming from Babcock.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think they're going to bring some horses over from there, so we'll have a couple animals in the barn area. The blacksmith will be working. It'll either be Ken or one of our other itinerant blacksmiths. We got a couple people that help out in the blacksmith shop, and in the trader's cabin will be open. Pierre Charette should be back from his sojourn up north looking for furs or whatever he looks for up north during the summertime. And in the house, of course, will be open, and in all its regalia, the ladies there will be happy to give you a tour, or they'll probably be working on some craft projects, either with the looms, or I think they're going to start making a quilt, and so they may be sewing some quilt squares. They've always got something going on there, and it's always kind of interesting. Usually a couple baking projects too that they got in the process. And the schoolhouse will be open for tours, and there's always a project. The master gardeners work with the students a lot of times, the young children when they come, and so they're drawing pictures or making bird feeders or peanut balls or whatever they're doing. Plus, you can see their great gardens. The vegetable garden will be in kind of its final phases just before it's wound down, and you can see that they've got a great vegetable garden. And in the flower garden, the quilt garden, and the butterfly garden. Hey, beautiful things. You really see a lot of butterflies there, yes. A lot of action there. They've done a fantastic job on our site, and I commend the master gardeners for all their work they put in there. A lot of it is days we don't see. They come out usually on days we're not there. Once in a while we run into them on Mondays. But just a beautiful job at the site. And so it's a great day, September 16th, Harvest Fair. One of our events I think we've been doing probably for 25 years, and it's just to show how they would have harvested things in the past, and how they would have preserved these things. Apple cider probably would have kept in the ice house, this sort of thing. They probably would have fermented some, made some vinegar, probably would have made some hard apple ciders, things like that. You hope to probably find a little bit of ice in the bottom of the ice house. Yes. It's getting, probably by September in a fairly warm summer, it's probably down to that last row or so, but I think last year you fished out a few pieces of ice. They get a little misshapen at this time of year.
Yes. The last few years, it's not as bad as the year before, but I've noticed we used quite a bit of ice for the Pioneer Fest, for keeping drinks cold, and also for display and to make ice cream. But I ran into that softer ice again. I thought when we were harvesting this winter, we really tried to cull out all the ice that was a little softer, but I did run into some softer ice, and that just does not store well at all.
Yeah, you almost have to cut that off before you store it, because I think it deteriorates faster, and it probably causes deterioration of the other ice quicker. Because once that sawdust gets wet, you don't have much insulative qualities anymore.
Well, it's coming into the problem with the ice crystallizing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just melting like an ice cube, it turns
Kind of like snowy, or
into almost like snowy, but into like crystals.
Mhm.
And it just kind of like you can just tap it and just
disintegrates.
disintegrates.
Mhm.
And that also makes for very poor ice to store.
Mhm.
So we have to take a better look
When we're harvesting,
When we're harvesting,
and
I-
separate that out.
Yes.
And so that's a good thing for us to look forward to. Also, on the Harvest Fair, the dedication of
yes.
the bunkhouse at 2 o'clock on September 16th. During the Harvest Fair, we're going to dedicate the bunkhouse, and we're going to have different people there. Linda and Ken Ham, who've donated the flooring. Jim and Phyllis Allen, who've donated a lot of lumber and we're going to have them cut. We don't use ribbons; it's too fancy for us folks. We use twine, and then we have Mead Witter Foundation had supported us with a monetary donation for our bunkhouse project, and so we'll have some people from Mead Witter Foundation to cut, and then we always have 3 or 4 employees cut one too. So it's kind of a nice event. And we'll have the one that started all this, Dave Engel, who wrote about Historic Point Boss and the Wakely House and everything. He started it, and so he's going to cut one of the twines too, just to dedicate the bunkhouse. So a good time to come out, and hopefully you can stay on. If you come out a little early, stay on for the bunkhouse. There'll be a ladies group, homemakers group out there serving lunch, so you'll have a choice of hamburgers or bratwurst or hot dogs or whatever they make. But anyway, you'll have something to eat, and maybe some chicken probably, and we'll have something to eat and something to drink. And so you can come out and don't worry about going home for lunch, because we're going to have it there for you. This homemakers group, it's a good fundraiser for them, so we help to support them. We can only on our kind of our system that we go on is we can have 2 feeds a year. Winter Feast is one, and the other one is the festival. And the other ones, we have to kind of farm them out to somebody else. So come out and support that homemakers group too. They do a nice job coming out and helping to support us and our group and what we do. And so we're looking forward to seeing you on September 16th, Harvest Fair from 10 to 4 p.m. Historic Pine Blast site east of Nakusa, just off County Trunk Z. Just watch for signs. We got some great signs. Thanks for being with me today, Don.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Here we are. They're cutting up with the ice block. And I believe they're going to get ready to put it into the ice grinder so they can grind it up into smaller pieces and then end up putting it into a round for making ice cream. So let's kind of see what he does here. So he's sawed part way through the block. Now he's got his little chopper and he just put that thing off, and now he's making it into smaller chunks. Now these chunks now, we'll take that and it'll go into a grinder. So he gets to grind that up now, and it comes out the other end as smaller little cubes. The bucket there, that's where the little ice cubes end up going so that they can make the ice cream. So it's just a constant matter of turning that crank, and it takes them about 20-25 minutes before ice cream is available. Can't wait for that to get done so we can have a little sampling of ice cream.
We are shaving ice. It's basically an ice plane. And it's turning it into like an early snow cone. And you can pack it, just turns right into snow, like a snowball. And it works quite fast. You'll see in a minute here, I can fill that reservoir right up. And he shaves the ice down and turns it into what would be early version of a snow cone.
All right.